We sold the company to Vanguard Tech for $1.8 billion. My father Otis said the words without even looking me in the eye. He was too busy adjusting the silk cuffs of his suit. My mother Bernice chimed in with a smile that did not reach her eyes. We are giving the equity to Trey. He is the man of the family now, and he has a baby on the way. You understand, do you not, Jada? I stared at them, then at my brother Trey, who was spinning in my CEO chair. So you sold my code? I asked quietly. My father laughed. We sold our company. You are just an employee, Jada. And as of this morning, you are fired. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. That is unfortunate, because you forgot one small detail. You sold the shell. I own the code. My name is Jada, and I am 29 years old. I spent 7 years building Onyx Stream from a dorm room project into a billion-dollar tech giant, only to have my own parents hand it to my incompetent brother because he was their golden child. What they did not know was that I had prepared for this betrayal since the day I wrote the first line of code. Before I continue this story of corporate warfare and sweet revenge, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to protect you. The air conditioning in the glass-walled conference room was humming, but it felt suffocatingly hot. We were on the 45th floor of the building I had selected myself, overlooking the Atlanta skyline. This was the headquarters of Onyx Stream, the pride of black tech excellence, or so the magazine said. But inside this room, it was just a slaughterhouse, and I was the cattle. Otis placed a thick leather folder on the mahogany table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The decision is final, Jada. The board met at 8 this morning. We voted 3-1. Vanguard Tech made an offer we could not refuse. $1.8 billion in cash and stock options. I looked at the folder. The board. That meant my father, my mother, and my brother Trey. I was the fourth vote, the dissenting vote, the one they had conveniently excluded from the meeting. But the algorithm is not ready for integration, I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the rage boiling in my chest. If you hand over the platform to Vanguard now without the stabilizing patch I am working on, the data compression will fail. You are selling them a broken product. Trey let out a loud, mocking laugh. He leaned back in the chair that still held the shape of my body. Always the technician, never the visionary. That is your problem, Jada. You worry about the ones and zeros. We worry about the legacy. Vanguard has their own engineers. They can fix your little bugs. This is about wealth generation. This is about the Brooks family name. He emphasized the word family like it was a weapon. Trey was 32 years old, 3 years my senior, and had never held a job for longer than 6 months until I hired him as director of marketing out of pity. He spent more time gambling on sports apps and buying designer watches than he did in strategy meetings. Yet here he was lecturing me about legacy. Bernice reached out and tried to touch my hand, but I pulled away. She sighed, playing the role of the peacemaker she always used to manipulate me. Jada, honey, listen to your brother. Trey is about to become a father. Courtney is used to a certain lifestyle and babies are expensive. We need to secure their future. You are single. You are independent. You have always been the strong one. You can find another job easily. You are smart. I looked at my mother. A woman who had never written a line of code in her life, telling me to walk away from my life's work so her precious son could play billionaire. So let me get this straight, I said, my eyes locking on hers. You are stripping me of my title, my equity, and my salary and handing it all to Trey because he impregnated a woman who treats me like the help. Do not talk about your sister-in-law that way, Otis snapped. His voice boomed the same tone he used to intimidate contractors. Courtney is family. She is carrying the first grandson of this family. You should be happy for your brother instead of being jealous. This is why we could not trust you with the CEO position, Jada. You are too emotional. You are too attached to the product. Business requires cold, hard logic. Logic. The irony was bitter. You want logic, I asked. Logic is that I wrote the core compression engine. Logic is that without me, this company is just a fancy logo and a rented office. Logic is that Trey cannot even reset his own email password without calling IT support. Enough? Otis slammed his hand on the table, rattling the water glasses. You are done, Jada. Security has already deactivated your badge. You have 30 minutes to clear your personal effects from your office. Do not touch any company property. That includes the laptop and any hard drives. Everything you created while employed here belongs to Onyx Stream. He slid a document across the table. It was a severance agreement. We are not monsters, Bernice said softly. We are family. We have arranged a monthly stipend for you. $5,000 a month for the next year. Enough to get back on your feet. All you have to do is sign this non-disclosure agreement and promise not to compete with us or badmouth the deal with Vanguard. $5,000. They were selling my work for nearly $2 billion and offering me pennies framed as charity. I looked at the document. Then I looked at Trey. He was checking his reflection in his gold Rolex, looking bored. He had won. In his mind, he had finally defeated the little sister who always outshone him in grades and awards and in success. I stood up slowly. I did not scream. I did not cry. I remembered what my mentor told me years ago. When you are a black woman in tech, they will wait for you to explode so they can call you angry. Do not give them the satisfaction. Be ice. I pushed the severance agreement back across the table. I will not be signing that, I said. Otis narrowed his eyes. Then you get nothing. Not a dime. And if you try to sue us, remember who has the money for the lawyers now. I will bury you in litigation until you are bankrupt, Jada. Do not test me. I picked up my purse. I am not testing you, Father. I am leaving. Good luck with the Vanguard deal. I have a feeling you are going to need it. I turned and walked toward the glass doors. My legs felt heavy, but I forced my spine to remain straight. Behind me, I heard Trey scoff. She will be back begging for money in a month, Trey said to them. She does not know how the real world works. I paused at the door, my hand on the cold metal handle. I reached into my pocket and felt the cool surface of a small encrypted USB drive. They thought they owned everything because they paid for the servers and the office chairs. But they didn't understand intellectual property law. When I started writing the code for the compression engine, I was a sophomore in college. I wasn't an employee of Onyx Stream because Onyx Stream didn't exist yet. I had registered the copyright under a separate LLC I created for a class project, a company called JD Protocol. When I joined the family business, I licensed the technology to Onyx Stream. I didn't transfer ownership, I leased it. And that lease agreement had a very specific clause. A clause that stated if I was ever terminated without cause, the license would expire immediately. Otis was a real estate man. He understood physical evictions. He was about to learn what a digital eviction looked like. I walked out of the conference room and didn't look back. I didn't go to my office to pack my plants or my photos. I didn't want anything from that place anymore. I walked straight to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and pulled out my phone. I typed a message to my personal attorney, a man I had kept on retainer secretly for 3 years, because I always knew this day might come. The message was short. It said simply, "Execute Protocol Orphan." As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the view of the empire I had built, I didn't feel like a victim. I checked the time. It was 11 a.m. By noon, the servers at Onyx Stream would begin to reject the encryption keys. By dinner time, the entire platform would be a useless brick. They wanted to give Trey a billion-dollar company. Fine. I was going to make sure that by the time he signed the papers, he was buying a billion-dollar hollow shell. I walked out of the building into the humid Atlanta heat, put on my sunglasses, and hailed a cab. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to war. But first I had to deal with the fact that my sister-in-law, Courtney, was probably already in my office measuring the drapes. And knowing her, she wouldn't just be throwing away my files. She would be looking for something to hurt me with. I had to get to my apartment before they realized that the war had already started. But as my cab pulled away from the curb, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the building security system at my penthouse. Someone had just used an emergency key to enter, My mother had a key. The betrayal wasn't just corporate, it was total. They weren't just firing me, they were erasing me. The walk from the boardroom to the executive wing was the longest 3 minutes of my life. I had designed this floor plan myself, insisting on open glass walls to foster transparency and collaboration. Now, those same glass walls felt like a fishbowl. I could feel the eyes of the junior developers and marketing assistants burning into my back. They knew. In a company this size, bad news travels faster than data packets on a fiber optic line. They kept their heads down, typing furiously at blank screens, terrified that making eye contact with the fallen founder might infect them with my bad luck. I reached the double-frosted doors at the end of the hall. The silver plaque next to the handle still read Jada Brooks, Chief Technology Officer. I took a breath, steeling myself to pack up 7 years of my life into a single cardboard box. I expected silence. I expected a moment to mourn the death of my career in private. Instead, I heard laughter. I pushed the door open and froze. My office, my sanctuary, was already being dismantled. 2 men in blue coveralls were taking my awards off the floating shelves and tossing them carelessly into a trash bin. And standing in the center of the room, directing the chaos like a conductor, was Courtney. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car, holding a latte in one hand and pointing with the other. "No, not that wall," she was saying to the movers. "The lighting is all wrong. We need to tear down these shelves and put up a full-length mirror, and maybe some bamboo accents." "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Courtney spun around. Her blonde ponytail swished perfectly. She didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed that I had interrupted her renovation. "Oh, hi, Jada," she said, taking a sip of her latte. "I did not hear you come in. We are just getting a head start. Trey said I could have this space. You are moving in?" I asked, stepping over a pile of my engineering journals that had been kicked onto the floor. "You do not even work here, Courtney. You are a Pilates instructor." Courtney smiled, that tight, condescending smile she reserved just for me. "Actually, Trey appointed me as the new chief wellness officer this morning. He thinks the company culture is too rigid, too stressed. I am going to turn this office into a private yoga and meditation studio for the executives. We need to clear out all this negative energy." She waved her hand at my desk. My 3-monitor setup, my server diagrams, the whiteboard covered in the complex mathematical formulas that were the backbone of the entire Onyx Stream platform. She called my life's work negative energy. She turned back to the movers. "You can throw away that whiteboard. It is ugly and it clashes with the feng shui. Do not touch that." I snapped, rushing forward. Before I could reach the whiteboard, a heavy hand clamped down on my shoulder. I spun around to face Trey. He had followed me from the boardroom, flanked by 2 security guards I had hired personally last Christmas. "Easy there, little sister," Trey said, tightening his grip on my shoulder before shoving me back slightly. "Let Courtney do her thing. You do not have a say in the decor anymore." I shook him off, dusting my blazer as if his touch had soiled it. "This is not about decor, Trey. That whiteboard contains the decryption keys for the legacy archive. If you erase it without backing it up, you lose 5 years of user data." Trey laughed, looking at Courtney for approval. She giggled along with him. "Listen to her," Trey mocked, always trying to sound so important. "We have IT guys for that stuff, Jada. You are not the only person who knows how to use a computer. Now grab your purse and get out." I walked over to my desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning my skin. I reached for my laptop, the sleek silver machine that held my local repository. "That stays," Trey barked. He lunged forward and snatched the laptop before my fingers could close around it. "That is my personal property," I lied. "I bought it with my own money." Trey held the laptop out of my reach, smirking. He flipped it over and tapped the barcode sticker on the bottom. "Property of Onyx Stream. Nice try, though. We know you kept the source code on here. You think we are stupid? We are not letting you walk out of here with our intellectual property, so you can go start a competitor company next week." Courtney stepped up beside him, resting her hand possessively on his arm. She looked at me with faux pity, her blue eyes wide and innocent. "Jada, please do not make this difficult," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "We are just trying to protect our investment. Think about the baby. Do you really want to steal from your own nephew? That is just low, even for you." I looked at them. The brother who used to let me do his homework so he would not fail math. The sister-in-law who had never spoken a kind word to me unless she wanted to borrow a designer bag. They stood there in the wreckage of my office, surrounded by the physical remnants of my hard work, thinking they had won. They had the office, they had the title, they had the laptop, but they did not understand that the code was not in the machine. It was not on the whiteboard. I took a deep breath and smoothed the front of my suit. I looked at the security guard, a man named Marcus, whose daughter I had helped get into a coding camp last summer. Marcus looked down at his boots, unable to meet my gaze. I did not blame him. He had a job to keep. "Fine," I said softly. "Keep the laptop. Keep the office. Keep the whiteboard." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my security badge. I tossed it onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Courtney. "But I am giving you one warning, Trey," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And you might want to listen because it is the last piece of free consulting you are ever going to get from me." Trey rolled his eyes. "Save the speech. Just leave." I ignored him. "The system architecture is built on a heartbeat protocol," I said, my voice steady and cold. "It requires a biometric handshake from the founder every 48 hours. If it does not get that handshake, it assumes the system has been compromised. It assumes a hostile takeover." Trey scoffed. "You are making that up. I have never heard of a heartbeat protocol." "That is because you never bothered to read the technical documentation," I replied. "You have exactly 48 hours before the system locks down. If I were you, I would stop measuring for curtains and start figuring out how to bypass a quantum encryption tunnel." Courtney let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Oh my God, Trey, she is so dramatic. She is just trying to scare us because she is jealous. Just ignore her." Trey looked at me, a flicker of doubt crossing his face for a second. But then he looked at his wife, and his ego took back the wheel. "Get out, Jada," he sneered, "and do not expect a reference letter." I turned on my heel. As I walked out, I heard Courtney say loudly behind me, "Finally. Now throw that ugly ergonomic chair in the trash. I want a velvet love seat right there." I walked past the rows of cubicles head high. I did not stop to say goodbye to anyone. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of my brother and his wife laughing in my destroyed office, I checked my watch. 12:15. The heartbeat protocol was not a 48-hour timer. That was a lie I told them to give them a false sense of security. The timer was set for 6 hours. I had lied about something else, too. The system did not just lock down, it cannibalized itself. By the time Courtney finished picking out her velvet love seat, the database would already be beginning to eat its own tail. I walked out of the building and into the blinding midday sun. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my bank. My corporate credit card had just been canceled. They were moving fast. But they were moving in the wrong direction. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of a small, nondescript office building on the other side of town. It was the Office of Waiting. It was where I had set up JD Protocol LLC. I sat back in the taxi seat and closed my eyes. The image of Courtney throwing my awards in the trash burned in my mind. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to turn my legacy into a yoga studio. I pulled out my phone and opened the terminal app connected to my private server. The command line blinked a green cursor against a black background. It was waiting for input. I typed one line, "Status report." The screen flooded with text. The Ghost protocol was active. The servers at Onyx Stream were currently running normally, but deep in the background the permissions were being rewritten. My admin access was gone. Yes. But in its place, a root-level lockout was quietly installing itself. I was not the intruder. I was the architect. And they had just locked themselves inside a burning building without realizing I was the only one with the key. But before I could disappear and let them burn, I had to survive the night, and I knew my mother. The guilt trip was coming. The family dinner, the public pressure. This was just the opening skirmish. The real war would be fought at the dinner table. The taxi ride to Midtown was a blur of concrete and glass. I stared out the window at the Atlanta streets, forcing my breathing to remain shallow and controlled. My phone buzzed incessantly in my hand, notification after notification. My company email access was revoked. My access to the company cloud storage was denied. Then came the pettiest blow of all, a text from Bank of America. Your transaction at Uber Technologies for $24 was declined. Please contact the card issuer. They had cut off my corporate card before I even made it 5 blocks away. My father, Otis, was nothing if not thorough when he decided to crush someone. He wanted me stranded, broke, and humiliated. He wanted me to call him crying, begging for that $5,000 allowance so I could pay for my ride home. I quietly switched my payment method to my personal savings account, the one Bernice did not know existed, and turned off my phone notifications. They were trying to break a woman who was already made of steel. I did not direct the driver to my apartment. Going home was dangerous. Trey and Courtney would be expecting that. They would probably send someone to harass me, or worse, serve me with a restraining order just to twist the knife. Instead, I had the driver drop me off in front of a brownstone building that looked more like a historic library than a place of business. A small brass plaque next to the heavy oak door read Thorne and Associates. I walked in without knocking. The receptionist, a woman named Sarah, who had been with the firm for 30 years, nodded at me. She did not ask if I had an appointment. She simply pressed a button on her intercom and said, "Mr. Thorne, she is here." The door to the inner office opened, and Elias Thorne stepped out. Elias was 70 years old, a shark in a 3-piece suit, who had been practicing corporate law since before I was born. He was the only person in Atlanta my father feared, and for the last 5 years, he had been working for me. "Come in, Jada," Elias said, his voice grave. I assume it happened. I walked into his office and sank into the leather chair opposite his desk. "It happened exactly as we predicted," I said. "Vanguard made the offer. The board voted without me. Otis fired me for cause to void my stock options, and Trey confiscated my laptop." Elias poured me a glass of water, his hands steady. He sat down and opened a drawer, pulling out a thick black file. "We prepared for this, Jada. Do you remember what you told me the day you walked into this office 5 years ago?" I closed my eyes, the memory washing over me as if it were yesterday. I had been 24, fresh out of MIT, naive and eager to please my family. I had just finished the beta version of the Onyx stream compression algorithm. I brought it to dinner, excited to show my father. I thought he would finally be proud of me. I thought he would see me as a partner. Instead, Otis had patted me on the head and said, "This is great, sweetheart. I will have the lawyers draft up the paperwork to transfer the copyright to the family holding company. We do not want you getting distracted by legal messy stuff. Just focus on being a good worker bee." That night I heard him talking to Trey in the study. He told Trey, "Let her do the heavy lifting. Once the patent is secured, we will put you in charge. Girls do not have the stomach for the big leagues." That was the moment the daughter died and the CEO was born. The next morning, I did not sign the transfer papers Otis gave me. I created a shell company, JD Protocol, LLC, and assigned the copyright to that entity. Then I signed a licensing agreement between JD Protocol and Onyx Stream. My father never read the fine print. He just saw my signature and assumed he owned me. I opened my eyes and looked at Elias. "I told you that I was building a bomb," I said quietly, "and that one day they would pull the pin for me." Elias nodded. He pushed a secure tablet across the desk. It was connected to an independent server completely separate from the Onyx Stream network. "Since they took your hardware, we will have to initiate the sequence from here. Are you sure about this, Jada? Once we execute the kill switch, there is no going back. The immediate financial loss to Onyx Stream will be catastrophic." Vanguard will likely pull out of the deal within hours. I looked at the tablet. On the screen was a simple command interface. It required a 64-character alphanumeric password that only existed in my memory. They did not just fire me, Elias, I said, my voice hardening. They tried to erase me. Trey is currently in my office telling his wife she can turn my server room into a yoga studio. They think my code is just a static asset like a building or a car. They think they can sell it, trade it, and keep the profits while I starve. They need to learn that without the architect, the building collapses. I pulled the tablet closer. My fingers hovered over the glass. The contract between JD Protocol and Onyx Stream clearly states that the license is valid only so long as Jada Brooks is employed as the Chief Technology Officer. I recited the legal language acting as my armor. Upon termination, the licensee has 0 days to cease and desist use of the core technology. Failure to comply grants the licensor the right to remotely revoke access to protect intellectual property. I began to type. The password was long and complex, a sequence of characters that felt like a melody I had been composing for years. The Ghost Protocol was not a virus. It did not delete data. That would be illegal. I was not a criminal. I was a landlord changing the locks. The protocol simply encrypted the data stream. It took the chaotic, massive flow of information that Onyx Stream processed every second and scrambled it. Without my unique decryption key, the data was just noise. Static. Useless. I typed the final character. The screen flashed red, then settled into a steady, pulsing amber light. Command sent the screen read. Revocation in progress. I sat back, expecting to feel guilt. I waited for the pang of regret for destroying the company I had built from the ground up. But it did not come. Instead, I felt a rush of cold, clarifying oxygen. At Onyx Stream headquarters, the chaos would be starting right about now. The first thing that would happen is the customer dashboards would freeze. Then the video streams would glitch, turning into pixelated garbage. Finally, the server fans would spin up to maximum speed as the system frantically tried to find a valid license key that no longer existed. Trey would be panic-stricken. He would scream at the IT guys. They would try to reboot, but a reboot would only cement the lockout. Elias watched me, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You know they are going to come for you," he said. "They will threaten lawsuits. They will call the police. They will try to claim sabotage." "Let them," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "I have not broken a single law. I am just a third-party vendor enforcing the terms of an expired contract. If they wanted to keep the lights on, they should have paid the electric bill." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. The caller ID displayed Otis Brooks, Dad. I let it ring. Then another call. Trey. I let it ring. Then a text from Bernice. "Jada, what is happening? The computers are all going crazy. Trey says you did something. Fix it now or your father is calling the FBI." I looked at Elias. "The FBI," I said with a laugh. "That is actually a great idea." I picked up the tablet and logged out, wiping my session. "I am going to need to stay somewhere safe tonight, Elias. Somewhere they cannot find me." Elias handed me a set of keys. "I have a corporate apartment in Buckhead. It is under the firm's name. Dorman private elevator, underground parking. Go there. Order room service. Do not answer the door for anyone but me." I took the keys. "Thank you." "One more thing," Elias said as I reached the door. "You just cost them $1.8 billion. A trapped animal bites Jada. Be careful." I walked out into the reception area. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But beneath the fatigue was resolve. They wanted a war. They wanted to show the world that the Brooks family was powerful, wealthy, and ruthless. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to show the world exactly who the Brooks family really was. As I stepped back out onto the street, my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. It was not my family this time. It was a number with a Silicon Valley area code. Vanguard Tech. They were faster than I thought. The buyers were calling. The house was burning down, and the people with the checkbook were starting to smell the smoke. I silenced the call and hailed another cab. "Let it burn," I whispered to myself. "Let it all burn down to the ground. Only then can I see if there is anything left worth saving in the ashes." But deep down, I knew the answer. The only thing waiting for me in the ashes would be the check for $2 billion that should have been mine in the first place. The estate in Buckhead was glowing like a cruise ship docked on a hill. My father Otis had bought this 6-bedroom mansion 3 years ago to prove to his golf buddies that he had arrived. Tonight, the driveway was lined with Bentleys and Mercedes, a parade of metal and ego that stretched all the way to the street. I paid my Uber driver and stepped out onto the cobblestones. The bass from the sound system inside was already thumping against my chest. I smoothed my dress. I had chosen a sharp, blood-red cocktail dress. Not the attire of a defeated daughter coming to beg for forgiveness, but the armor of a woman who knew she was walking into a nest of vipers. My mother Bernice met me at the door. She was wearing gold sequins and holding a glass of champagne that cost more than my rent. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my empty hands. "No gift for the expecting parents." She noted, her voice tight. "I am here, aren't I?" I replied. "You said it was urgent. You said we needed to heal the family." Bernice smiled, that practiced hostess smile she used for charity galas. "We do. Your father is very upset, Jada. But we are willing to overlook your outburst this morning if you are willing to be reasonable. Come inside. Everyone is asking about you." I walked into the foyer. The house smelled of expensive cologne and roasted lamb. The living room was packed with the who is who of Atlanta's black elite. Doctors, lawyers, politicians. People who had watched me grow up. People who had patted me on the head when I won the national coding championship at 16, only to ask my brother what sports he was playing. "There she is," a voice boomed. I turned to see my Aunt Sheila approaching. Sheila was my mother's sister and the family news broadcaster. "If you wanted a secret kept, you did not tell Sheila." "We heard the news," Sheila said, sipping her drink and leaning in close. "Fired from your own company. That is a shame, baby. But honestly, we all knew this day was coming. You were always too intense. A company needs a man's touch to really scale. Trey is going to do wonders." I looked over at Trey. He was standing by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a cigar. He was surrounded by a group of men laughing loudly. "I just told Vanguard, look, the code is the easy part," Trey was saying loud enough for half the room to hear. "My sister wrote the basics, sure. But the vision, the strategy, that was all me. I had to guide her every step of the way. Honestly, getting rid of her was a strategic necessity. She was holding us back." The men nodded in agreement, patting him on the back. "A toast to the new CEO," someone shouted. My stomach churned. It was not just the lies. It was the ease with which he erased 7 years of my 80-hour work weeks. Courtney appeared at my elbow. She was glowing, rubbing her small baby bump as if it were a shield. "I am surprised you showed up," she whispered, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "If I were you, I would be too embarrassed to show my face. Everyone knows, Jada. Everyone knows you tried to sabotage the deal because you were jealous." I turned to her. "Is that the story you are telling people? It is the truth, isn't it?" she smirked. "But do not worry, Trey and I are generous. We are going to let you keep your little apartment. Assuming you sign the papers tonight." Papers? So that was the ambush. My father appeared from the crowd, looking like a king holding court. He put a heavy arm around my shoulders, steering me away from the party and toward his private study. The noise of the music faded as he closed the heavy oak doors. Bernice and Trey followed us in. The study was quiet. On the desk sat a single document and a gold pen. "Sit down," Otis said. I remained standing. "I prefer to stand. Suit yourself," Otis grunted. He tapped the document. "This is the revised separation agreement. We increased the monthly stipend to $6,000, and we added a clause that says you will publicly endorse Trey as the new CEO. In exchange, we will not sue you for the encryption stunt you pulled today." They thought the system lockout was just a stunt. They thought I had just changed a password. They had no idea that at that very moment, the Ghost Protocol was rewriting the kernel of the operating system, and if I do not sign, I asked. Then you are dead to us, Bernice said, her voice trembling with staged emotion. You are cutting yourself off from this family. You will not see your nephew. You will not be invited to Christmas. You will be a stranger, Jada. Is your pride really worth that much? I looked at them. My father the bully, my mother the enabler, my brother the thief. They were not offering me family. They were offering me a bribe to stay silent while they robbed me. I looked at the document. Non-disclosure agreement, assignment of rights, public apology. I reached into my purse. I actually brought my own paperwork, I said. Trey laughed. What is it? A resignation letter written in crayon. I pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was the formal notice of license revocation drafted by Elias Thorne. It stated clearly that due to the termination of the primary creator, the usage rights for the JD protocol were hereby withdrawn effective immediately. I placed the envelope on the desk face down. I will sign yours, I said softly, if you accept mine. Otis looked suspicious. What is yours? Just a receipt, I lied smoothly. Acknowledging that I have returned all company property and that I hold no further liability for what happens to the system after tonight. Since you are the CEO now, Trey, I want to make sure I cannot be blamed if, things go wrong. Trey puffed out his chest. Nothing will go wrong. I have a team of experts coming in tomorrow. But fine. Give me the liability waiver. I do not want you claiming credit for my success later anyway. Otis pushed the NDA toward me. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. I signed my name, Jada Brooks. But under my signature in script so small they would need a magnifying glass to see it. I added the letters VC Vi Coactus, Latin for under duress. It was a legal Hail Mary, but it made me feel better. I slid the paper back to Otis. He checked the signature, smiled, and put it in his drawer without even looking at the rest of the page. Now take this, I said, sliding my envelope toward Trey. My gift to the new management. Read it later. You should probably go back to your party. Trey grabbed the envelope and tossed it carelessly onto the pile of unopened mail on the desk. Done. Now get out. You are depressing the mood. I turned to leave. Bernice reached out to hug me, but I stepped back. Goodbye, Mother, I said. I walked out of the study through the living room, past the Aunt Sheila's and the fake friends, past the champagne tower and the towering ego of my family. As I stepped out the front door, I heard a cheer erupt from inside. Speech, speech, they were chanting for Trey. I walked down the driveway to where my Uber was waiting. I checked my watch. The Ghost Protocol timer had zeroed out 10 minutes ago. Inside that house, they were toasting to $1 billion future. But in the server room across town, the screens had already gone black. The compression engine had stopped. The data was beginning to fracture. They were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic, and I had just removed the rudder. I got into the car. Where to miss, the driver asked. Somewhere quiet, I said. I have a feeling things are about to get very loud. The sun rose over Atlanta the next morning with a brilliance that felt like a personal blessing. For the first time in 7 years, I did not wake up to an alarm at 5 a.m. I did not check my email before my eyes were fully open. I did not rush to put on a power suit. Instead, I sat on the balcony of the corporate apartment Elias had loaned me, sipping a cup of artisanal coffee and watching the city wake up below me. I felt light. But across town in the boardroom, I used to command the atmosphere was heavy enough to crush a man. I was not there, but I knew exactly what was happening. I had choreographed every second of it. At 10 a.m. sharp, the delegation from Vanguard Tech arrived at Onyx Stream headquarters. These were not the friendly sales reps. These were the technical auditors. The people whose job it was to make sure the $1.8 billion they were about to spend was not buying a lemon. And leading them was David Sterling, a man known in Silicon Valley as the Butcher because he cut bad projects without mercy. My brother Trey was waiting for them. He was wearing a brand new bespoke suit that probably cost more than my first car, trying to look the part of the visionary CEO. Otis and Bernice were there too, smiling their plastic smiles, eager to sign the final papers and get their payout. David Sterling did not smile. He sat at the head of the table, opened his laptop, and said 3 words. "Show me the speed." Trey stood up confident. He had rehearsed this. He had seen me do it 1,000 times. He walked over to the main terminal, the one connected to the central server core. "Gentlemen," Trey said, his voice booming with unearned arrogance, "you are about to witness the fastest data compression in history. The Onyx Stream engine does not just process data, it inhales it." He placed his hand on the biometric scanner to log in. Normally, the scanner would glow green, recognize the user, and unlock the dashboard. But today, the scanner remained dark. A small, polite beep echoed in the silent room. Trey frowned. He wiped his palm on his pants and tried again. "Access denied." He laughed nervously, glancing back at the stone-faced executives. "Must be a little grease on my hand. These machines are sensitive. You know how technology is." He typed in the manual override code, the password I had given him yesterday, the password that was valid only for a system that no longer existed. He hit enter. For a moment, nothing happened. The massive screen on the wall remained black. Then a single line of white text appeared in the center. "Error 404, architect not found." Trey tapped the keyboard frantically. "Come on," he muttered. "Work, you piece of junk." Otis stood up, his smile faltering. "Is there a problem, son?" "Just a glitch," Trey said, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. "It is probably just an internet connection issue. Let me try the backup server." He entered another command. This time the screen did not just show text, it turned a violent flashing red. A countdown timer appeared. "System integrity compromised, rebooting in safe mode." Safe mode meant the system was stripping itself down to the bare bones. No advanced compression, no AI sorting, just a basic slow file storage system that any high school student could build. David Sterling closed his laptop with a snap. "This is embarrassing," he said, his voice cutting through Trey's panic. "We were told this platform was turnkey ready. We were told the latency was near zero." "It is," Trey stammered. "It worked fine yesterday, I swear." "Then make it work now," Sterling said. "I have a flight to San Francisco in 2 hours. If I do not see a working demo in 10 minutes, I am recommending we pull the offer." The room erupted into chaos. Otis was yelling at the IT director. The IT director was yelling that his admin keys were revoked. Bernice was trying to offer everyone water, looking like she was about to faint. And Trey was slamming his fist on the keyboard, looking like a toddler who broke his toy. That was when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Otis. I took a slow sip of my coffee, let it ring 3 times, and then answered. "Hello," I said, my voice calm and breezy. Jada, Otis screamed. The sound was so loud, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Get down here." "Now I am afraid I cannot do that," I said. "I am busy." "Busy doing what?" "You are unemployed," Otis roared. "The system is down. Everything is red. Vanguard is threatening to walk. Fix it, Jada. Fix it right now, or I swear to God I will." "You will," what I interrupted. "You will fire me again. Stop playing games. This is $1.8 billion. The password is not working." "Of course it is not working," I said. "That password was for the licensed version of the software. But since you fired the licensor, the software has reverted to the free trial version." "Free trial," Otis sputtered. "What are you talking about? I explained it to you in the boardroom, Dad. I own the code. You sold the company, but you forgot to check who owned the engine. When you kicked me out, you kicked the engine out too." Otis went silent. I could hear Trey in the background shouting at the computer screen. I could hear the Vanguard executives packing up their bags. Jada, Otis said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, desperate growl. You are hurting the family. You are hurting your brother. You are hurting your unborn nephew. How can you be so selfish? Selfish. I laughed, and for the first time I let the anger seep into my voice. You sold my life's work to buy Trey a yacht. You fired me from the company I built. And now, when your incompetence is on display for the whole world to see, you want me to come save you? I am not asking, Jada. I am telling you. If you do not unlock the system in 5 minutes, I am calling the police. I will tell them you planted a virus. I will tell them you are a cyber terrorist. I will have you thrown in jail so fast your head will spin. Go ahead, I said. Call them. Tell them to check the IP logs. Tell them to read the contract Elias Thorne sent you yesterday, the one Trey used as a coaster for his beer. It is all legal, Dad. I did not break anything. I just took my ball and went home. Otis was breathing hard, a ragged, panicked sound. Please, Jada, just tell us the code. We can negotiate. We can give you your job back. I looked out at the skyline. I did not want my job back. I did not want their money. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to feel powerless. I will tell you what I said. Put David Sterling on the phone. What? No, I am not letting you talk to. Put him on the phone, Otis, or the next error message the system displays will be a permanent data wipe. There was a pause. Then I heard a shuffling sound. This is Sterling, a deep, skeptical voice said. Who is this, Mr. Sterling? This is Jada Brooks, the founder and creator of the Onyx Stream architecture. I apologize for the technical difficulties my former colleagues are experiencing. They seem to be having trouble operating the equipment. Former colleagues, Sterling asked. I was told you were out sick. I smiled. Was that what they told you? No, Mr. Sterling. I was fired yesterday. And since I hold the intellectual property rights to the core algorithm, the system has naturally ceased to function. I would hate for Vanguard to purchase a shell company with no actual assets. The line went quiet. I could practically hear the gears turning in Sterling's head. He was a shark. He smelled blood in the water. But he also realized that the Meet the Code was not in the room with him. It was on the phone. I see, Sterling said slowly. That is very interesting information, Ms. Brooks. Give me the phone. I heard Otis yell. Sterling ignored him. Ms. Brooks, are you saying that the demo we are looking at, this red screen, is what we are actually buying, unless you negotiate directly with the owner of the code? Yes, that is exactly what you are buying. There was a scuffle on the other end. Otis snatched the phone back. You are dead to me, Otis screamed. Do you hear me? You are dead. He hung up. I placed my phone down on the table. My hand was trembling slightly, but I felt a strange sense of peace. The bridge was not just burned, I had nuked it. I picked up my tablet and checked the server status. The safe mode countdown had reached 0. The Onyx Stream database was now officially locked, encrypted, inaccessible. At the office, Trey was probably watching his billion-dollar future dissolve into pixels. Bernice was probably crying about what the neighbors would think. And Otis was probably realizing that for the first time in his life, he could not bully his way out of a problem. I finished my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. I stood up and went inside to get dressed. I had a feeling I would be having a lunch meeting with Mr. Sterling very soon. But this time it would not be at my father's table. It would be on my terms, and the price just went up. The digital clock on the microwave read 11:40 p.m. The corporate apartment Elias had secured for me was on the 32nd floor, high above the noise of Buckhead. It was a fortress of glass and steel, silent and cool. I was sitting at the kitchen island, finishing a medium-rare ribeye steak I had ordered from the steakhouse downstairs. I had paired it with a glass of bold Cabernet. For the first time all day, my shoulders had dropped from their defensive hunch. Then the intercom buzzed. It was a harsh, jarring sound that cut through the silence like a siren. I did not jump, I did not panic. I simply picked up my wine glass, walked over to the security panel on the wall, and pressed the video button. The screen flickered to life, showing a black and white view of the hallway outside my door. Standing there looking disheveled and frantic were Otis and Bernice. My father was not wearing his suit jacket. His tie was loosened, hanging crookedly around his neck like a noose. My mother, usually so poised that she slept in pearls, looked as if she had been crying. Her mascara was smudged under one eye. They looked like desperate people. They looked like people who had just realized that the $1.8 billion check they were counting on had just bounced. I watched them for a moment, taking a sip of wine. I did not press the talk button. I just watched. Otis pounded on the door. It was a heavy, solid wood door, reinforced for privacy, but his fist made a dull thud that vibrated through the frame. "Jada," he shouted. His voice was muffled but audible. "I know you are in there. The doorman told us you are up here. Open this door right now." I took another bite of my steak. It was perfectly seasoned. Bernice leaned in close to the door. "Jada, baby, please. We just want to talk. We are worried about you. You are not answering your phone. We thought something might have happened to you." I almost laughed. They were worried about me. That was the first lie of the night. They were worried about the code. They were worried about Vanguard Tech walking away. They were worried about their reputation. When I did not answer, the pounding stopped. There was a moment of silence, and then the manipulation began. This was the dance I had known my entire life. The Brooks family, two-step. First came the anger, then came the guilt. Jada, Bernice said, her voice trembling. "Do not do this to your family. We are your parents. We raised you. We paid for your tuition at MIT. Is this how you repay us? By hiding behind a locked door and destroying your brother's future." I walked over to the intercom and finally pressed the button. I did not unlock the door. I just opened the audio line. "You did not pay for MIT," I said calmly into the speaker. "I had a full academic scholarship, and I worked 2 jobs to pay for my living expenses because Otis said spending money on a girl's education was a bad investment. Do not rewrite history just because you are desperate." There was a pause. They were shocked I had answered. Jada, Otis barked, dropping the pretense of concern instantly. "Open this door. We need to fix this mess you created." Sterling is furious. He says the deal is off if the system is not back online by tomorrow morning. "That sounds like a CEO problem," I replied. "Why is Trey not fixing it?" "Oh, right. Because Trey does not know how to code." "Listen to me," Otis said, his voice dropping to that low, menacing tone that used to make me freeze when I was a child. "You are going to come out here. You are going to get in the car, and you are going to drive to the office and unlock the server. If you do that, we will forget this ever happened. We will even give you your job back." I swirled the wine in my glass. My job back? As what I asked? As CTO? There was a hesitation, a split second of silence that told me everything I needed to know. "Well," Otis stammered, "Trey is the CEO now, obviously. We cannot change that. It would look weak to the investors. But you can come back as a senior engineer. You can report to Trey. He will sign off on your hours." "It is a good offer, Jada. Better than you deserve after the stunt you pulled today." I leaned my forehead against the cool wall next to the intercom. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to come back and save their fortune, fix the product I created, and in exchange, I could have the privilege of working for the brother who stole it from me. "You are delusional," I said. Bernice started crying loudly. I could hear the theatrics in her sobbing. It was a performance designed to penetrate the door and break my heart. "How can you be so cruel?" she wailed. "Trey is beside himself. He is having a panic attack. Courtney is stressed out and it is bad for the baby. If she miscarries, it will be your fault, Jada. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to kill your own nephew?" There it was. The ultimate weapon, blaming me for a life that had not even started yet. This was gaslighting in its purest form. They were taking their greed, their incompetence, and their betrayal and twisting it until I was the villain who was hurting a baby. For a second, the old Jada, the little girl who just wanted her mother to love her, wanted to open the door. She wanted to apologize and fix everything just to make the crying stop. But the new Jada, the one who had watched her life's work be sold for parts, stepped in. "I am not hurting anyone," I said, my voice ice cold. "I am eating dinner. You are the one standing in a hallway screaming at a locked door. If Trey is having a panic attack, tell him to read the documentation. It is all there. Or maybe he can ask his wife to lead him in some breathing exercises." Otis kicked the door. A sharp, violent crack echoed through the apartment. "You ungrateful little brat," he screamed. "I made you. I put clothes on your back. You are nothing without the Brooks name. You hear me? Nothing." I looked at the monitor. Otis's face was red, his veins bulging. He looked ugly. Not physically, but spiritually. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life building a castle on sand, and now the tide was coming in. "I am not a Brooks anymore," I said. "You fired me. Remember, you cut me out. You said I was just an employee. Well, employees do not work for free, and they certainly do not work for people who abuse them." "Jada, please," Bernice pleaded, switching tactics again. "We can pay you. How much do you want? 10,000, 20,000, just give us the password." I pressed the button one last time. "The price is $1.8 billion, I said. Silence. Absolute stunned silence. "That is the value of the code," I continued. "If you want it, buy it. But you already sold the money to Vanguard, didn't you? So I guess you cannot afford me." I released the button. I turned off the intercom screen. I could still hear them outside. Otis was shouting obscenities now, threats of lawsuits, threats of violence. Bernice was sobbing, calling my name over and over. But without the electronic link, they sounded distant. They sounded like ghosts haunting a house I no longer lived in. I walked back to the kitchen island. My steak was cold, but I ate it anyway. I chewed slowly, listening to the muffled sounds of my parents falling apart. After about 10 minutes, building security arrived. I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway, then a deep, authoritative voice asking them to leave. "Do you know who I am?" Otis shouted. "I own this town." "Sir, you are disturbing the residents," the guard said. "You need to vacate the premises immediately, or we will call the police." There was a scuffle, some more shouting, and then the sound of the elevator dinging. The hallway went quiet. I was alone again. I washed my plate and my wine glass. I dried them and put them away. I wiped down the counter. My movements were mechanical, precise. I was holding myself together by sheer force of will. It hurt. Of course it hurt. No matter how successful you are, no matter how tough you build your armor, hearing your father call you nothing, and your mother accuse you of killing a baby leaves a mark. But pain is just data. It is a signal that something is wrong. And I had already removed the glitch from my system. I went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I checked my phone. There was a voicemail from David Sterling. "Ms. Brooks," the message said. "This is David Sterling. I think we need to meet. Without your family. I am at the St. Regis. Breakfast tomorrow, 8 a.m. Do not be late." I deleted the message. I would be there, but I would not be early, and I certainly would not be cheap. I lay down in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The gaslighting had failed. They tried to make me question my reality, to make me feel responsible for their sins. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what was real. The code was real. The contract was real. And the silence in this apartment, free from their toxic noise, was the most real thing of all. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, while across town I knew my brother was staring at a red screen, praying for a miracle that was never going to come. The morning sun was just beginning to streak across my apartment floor, but I knew that inside the server room at Onyx Stream, it was still the dead of night. I sat with my tablet propped up against a fruit bowl, watching a stream of data that told a very specific story. While I had been sleeping, my brother Trey had decided to commit a felony. I knew he would not go back to the internal IT department. The head of security had already resigned in protest after I left, and the rest of the team was too terrified of the legal ramifications to touch a locked system. So Trey did exactly what I predicted he would do. He went outside the company. He hired a mercenary. I watched the access logs. At 2 a.m., a new device had connected to the local network. It was not a company-issued laptop. It was a custom rig, a high-powered machine designed for one thing: brute force penetration. The user ID simply read admin temp. I took a sip of orange juice and visualized the scene. The air conditioning in the server room would be blasting, but Trey would still be sweating through his shirt. He would be pacing back and forth yelling at some guy in a hoodie who he had probably found on a dark web forum or through one of his shady gambling contacts. The logs showed the hacker probing the firewall. He was good. Better than I expected. He bypassed the first layer of encryption in under 20 minutes. I saw him isolating the core database, trying to peel back the layers of protection I had wrapped around the compression engine. But he was about to hit the wall. I had named this specific security layer the DNA strand. It was not just a password. It was a biometric handshake embedded into the source code itself. Every time the algorithm executed a command, it checked for a digital signature that matched a hash of my own biometric data. My fingerprint, my retinal scan, even the cadence of my typing. Without that biological key, the code was inert. It was like trying to start a car with a picture of a key. On my screen, a yellow alert popped up. Unauthorized biometric bypass attempt. The hacker was trying to spoof my signature. He was injecting fake data, trying to trick the system into thinking I was the one at the keyboard. I leaned forward. "Come on," I whispered. "Take the bait." At the office, the hacker let us call him Silas likely stopped typing. He probably spun his chair around to face Trey and Otis. I could imagine the conversation perfectly. "Mr. Brooks," Silas would say, pushing his glasses up his nose. "We have a problem. This is not just a lockout. This is a dead man's switch." Trey would be vibrating with anxiety. "What does that mean?" "Just break it. I am paying you $10,000 an hour." "It means the code is looking for a person," Silas would explain. "Specifically, Jada Brooks. It scans for her biometric markers. If I try to force my way past this point without her fingerprint, the system interprets it as a hostile attack." So what Otis would bark from the corner. "It is a computer. It does not have feelings." "Hack it." Silas would shake his head. "You do not understand." Ms. Brooks wrote a tripwire into the kernel. If I execute a brute force command to override the biometric lock, the system will automatically package the last 24 hours of server activity and email it to the Federal Trade Commission and the FBI Cybercrimes Division. It is a failsafe against corporate espionage. If I break this door down, the police are going to know exactly who swung the hammer. This was the moment of truth. A rational person would stop. A rational person would realize they were beaten and call a lawyer. But my family was not rational. They were desperate. They were staring at a deadline from Vanguard Tech that was only a few hours away. I saw the pause in the data stream. They were arguing. Trey was likely terrified of the FBI. But he was more terrified of Otis. He was terrified of being exposed as a fraud. He was terrified of Courtney leaving him if the money dried up. And Otis was blinded by pride. To him, I was just his daughter. I was property. Therefore, my code was his property. In his twisted logic, breaking into his own property could not be a crime. "I am the chairman of the board." Otis would shout, spit flying from his mouth. "I authorize the override. Do you hear me? I am giving you a direct order. Break the lock." "But it is illegal," Sir Silas would warn one last time. "I do not care about the law," Otis would scream. "I care about my money. Break it." I watched the screen. The cursor on my tablet blinked. And then it happened. The log updated. Command executed, force override. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. They did it. They actually did it. The screen on my tablet turned from yellow to a deep, satisfying crimson. The text scrolled rapidly. Intrusion detected. Hostile actor confirmed. Countermeasures activated. Preparing evidence package. At the office, the monitors would be flashing. Sirens might even be going off on the server rack. Silas would be scrambling to disconnect his rig, but it was too late. The system had already captured his MAC address, his location, and the digital footprint of his attack. And because Trey had used his own administrator credentials to grant Silas access to the room, Trey's digital fingerprints were all over the murder weapon. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was an automated email from the system. Subject Security Breach Report, case number 8940. Attached was a 5 GB file containing every keystroke they had made in the last hour, and in the carbon copy line were the email addresses for the Vanguard legal team, my lawyer Elias Thorne, and the Atlanta field office of the FBI. I did not send that email, my code sent it. I was just a bystander eating breakfast. I picked up my coffee cup and walked to the window. I wondered if they knew yet. I wondered if the red lights in the server room had tipped them off that they had just turned a civil contract dispute into a federal criminal case. Probably not. They were probably cheering. They probably thought the red lights meant the system was rebooting. They probably thought they had won. My phone rang. It was Elias. "Did you see the alert?" Elias asked, his voice sounding grave but satisfied. "I saw it," I said. "They just triggered the Wire Fraud Act," Elias said. "By using an electronic device to forcibly bypass a security measure on a system valued over $1 million, they just committed a federal offense. And since they are doing it to facilitate the sale to Vanguard, it is also securities fraud." "I know," I said. "Vanguard just received the automated notification," Elias continued. "David Sterling is going to lose his mind. He is going to think Onyx Stream is under attack by foreign hackers. He is about to find out the hackers are in the CEO office," I said. Jada. Elias paused. "You know, once this ball starts rolling, we cannot stop it. The FBI takes cyber intrusions on financial systems very seriously. Trey could go to prison. Otis could lose everything." I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked at the woman who had spent her whole life trying to be good enough, trying to earn a seat at a table they never intended to give me. "They made their choice, Elias," I said. "They hired the hacker. They gave the order. I just built the fence. I cannot help it if they decided to climb over it into a minefield." "I understand," Elias said. "I am preparing the affidavit now. I will meet you at the St. Regis for your meeting with Sterling. Do not say a word to your family if they call." "I will not," I said. I hung up. The city below me looked peaceful, unaware that one of its biggest tech empires was imploding in real time. I went to my closet and pulled out my favorite suit. It was white, sharp, clean, and commanding, the color of a fresh start, the color of a woman who had nothing to hide. I was going to meet David Sterling, and I was going to watch him realize that the $1.8 billion he wanted to spend was not for the company my parents owned. It was for the forgiveness only I could grant. And today, forgiveness was out of stock. The courier from Vanguard Tech did not knock politely. He walked into the lobby of Onyx Stream at 11 a.m. sharp and slapped a thick envelope onto the reception desk. It was not a holiday greeting card. It was a formal notice of breach of contract, and it was the paper equivalent of a nuclear bomb dropped right into the center of my family's living room. I was sitting in a booth at a diner across the street watching through the window. I saw the receptionist, a sweet girl named Maya, look terrified as she signed for the package. She immediately called the executive suite. Moments later, I saw Trey running through the lobby, snatching the envelope from her hands, as if it contained the antidote to a poison he had already swallowed. In a way it did. But the poison was his own incompetence, and there was no cure for that. I did not need to be in the room to know what the letter said. My lawyer Elias had received a courtesy copy 10 minutes earlier. It was brutal. Vanguard Tech was giving Onyx Stream exactly 48 hours to restore full functionality to the compression engine. If the deadline passed without the code being unlocked, Vanguard would not only unilaterally terminate the acquisition deal, but they would also file a lawsuit for fraudulent inducement. They were suing for damages. They were suing for lost time. And most terrifying of all for my father, they were threatening to pierce the corporate veil, meaning they would come after the personal assets of the board members, the house in Buckhead, the cars, the offshore accounts. Everything was on the table. Inside the executive boardroom, the scene was unraveling exactly as I had predicted. I had tapped into the boardroom audio feed earlier that morning. It was a security vulnerability I had meant to patch months ago, but I never got around to it. Now it was my front row seat to the circus. $1.8 billion, Otis was screaming. His voice was raw, cracking under the strain. He sounded like a wounded animal. They are going to take everything. Do you understand me, Trey? They are going to take the house. They are going to take your mother's jewelry. They are going to leave us on the street. I am trying, Dad, Trey shouted back. His voice was higher than usual, laced with panic. But Jada locked it down tight. That hacker you made me hire could not get in. It is not my fault. Not your fault, Otis roared. I heard the sound of glass shattering. He must have thrown a tumbler against the wall. You are the CEO. You stood there and told them you were the visionary. You told them Jada was just a grunt. Well, fix it, Mr. Visionary. Write the code. I cannot write code. Trey whined. You know I cannot. I am a marketing guy. Then what good are you? Otis yelled. I handed you a golden goose and you choked it to death in 24 hours. I should have left you in the mailroom. The silence that followed was heavy. For 32 years, Trey had been the golden child, the son who could do no wrong, the son who got the new cars while I got the hand-me-downs. The son who got the praise for simply existing while I had to conquer the world just to get a nod. And now, for the first time, Otis was seeing him clearly. He was seeing a man with no talent, no grit, and no value. But the real knife twist did not come from Otis. It came from Courtney. Up until this moment, my sister-in-law had been playing the role of the supportive, fragile wife. She sat in the corner, rubbing her belly, looking like a victim. But when she heard Otis say the money was gone, something in her snapped. The mask fell off, and the real Courtney stepped out. So there is no money? Courtney asked. Her voice was ice cold. It cut through the shouting match like a razor. Otis stopped panting. What did you say? He asked. I said, is the deal dead? Courtney repeated. She stood up. I could hear her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she walked toward Trey. Because if the deal is dead, Trey, then what exactly am I doing here? Trey stammered. Baby, do not worry. We will figure it out. It is just a setback. A setback? Courtney laughed. A harsh, cruel sound. A setback is missing a dinner reservation. Losing $2 billion is a catastrophe. You told me this was a done deal. You told me we were going to buy the villa in St. Bart's next week. I already put a deposit down on the decorators. We can still do that, Trey pleaded. I just need time. You do not have time, Courtney snapped, and you clearly do not have the brains. My God, Jada was right about you. The room went deadly silent. Even I, listening from across the street, felt the shock of that statement. What did you say? Trey whispered. I said, Jada was right, Courtney yelled. You are useless. You are a fraud, Trey. You have been riding your sister's coattails your entire life. She built this company. She wrote the code. She made the money. And you just spent it. You walk around in these expensive suits acting like a big shot, but without her, you are nothing. You are a child playing dress-up. Courtney Bernice gasped. That is your husband. You are carrying his child. Courtney let out a scoff of disgust. Am I? You know I am starting to wonder if I should even keep it. Why would I want to bring a child into a family of losers? Courtney, no. Trey cried out. He sounded broken. Please do not say that. Then fix it, Courtney screamed. Do not look at your daddy. Do not look at your mommy. Be a man for once in your life and fix it. If we lose this money, Trey, I am gone. I am not sticking around to visit you in debtor's prison. I did not sign up for poverty. The audio feed was filled with the sound of Trey sobbing. It was pathetic. A grown man, a CEO, crying because his wife threatened to leave him over money. This was the family that had judged me. This was the family that had called me selfish. They were eating each other alive the moment the checkbook closed. Otis spoke up, his voice low and dangerous. He had regained his composure, but it was a terrifying kind of calm. Stop crying, he ordered Trey. And Courtney, sit down and shut your mouth. Nobody is leaving. Nobody is losing anything. We have 48 hours, Otis continued. That is 2 days. In the business world, 2 days is a lifetime. We do not need to write the code. We do not need to unlock the system. Then what do we do? Trey sniffled. We just need to make Vanguard believe we did, Otis said. We need to buy time until the check clears. Once the money is wired to the offshore trust, it does not matter if the system works or not. We will be in the Cayman Islands before they realize what happened. That is fraud, Bernice whispered. That is prison. It is only fraud if we get caught, Otis replied. And we are not going to get caught, because we are going to give them exactly what they want. They want Jada's signature. We will give them Jada's signature. They want the intellectual property rights. We will give them the rights. But Jada will not sign, Trey said. She made that clear. She does not have to sign, Otis said. We have files. We have old contracts. We have scanners. Jada worked here for 7 years. Her signature is on 1,000 documents. All we need to do is lift it, place it on the new transfer agreement, and backdate it to last week. I sat up straight in the booth. My heart began to race. They were actually going to do it. They were going to cross the line from civil contract dispute to criminal forgery. Otis was desperate. He was cornered. And a cornered man does not think about consequences. He only thinks about survival. Trey, get the old employment contracts from the archive, Otis ordered. Bernice, find the transfer deed we drafted 5 years ago, the one she refused to sign. We are going to fix it. We are going to make it look like she signed it the day she started. But the notary stamp, Bernice worried. I have a notary on payroll who owes me a favor, Otis said. He will stamp whatever I put in front of him. We are going to present Vanguard with a fully executed notarized transfer of rights tomorrow morning. We will tell them Jada was just lying to shake us down for more money. We will show them the paper proof that Onyx Stream owns the code. I reached for my phone. I needed to call Elias. This was it. This was the final nail in the coffin. I listened as they hatched their plan. They sounded energized now. They sounded hopeful. Courtney even apologized to Trey, telling him she was just stressed, rubbing his back as he looked for the scanner. They were bonding over a felony. They had no idea that the archive room had a motion-activated camera. They had no idea that I had cloud access to the printer logs. They were about to document their own crime in high definition. I signaled the waitress for the check. I had seen enough. The ultimatum from Vanguard had done its job. It had squeezed them until their morality shattered. I left the diner and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because the people who raised me were truly criminals at heart. Relief because now I did not have to hold back. I did not have to worry about being the bad guy. They were about to forge my signature to steal $2 billion. I walked toward the subway station. I had a meeting to prepare for, and I needed to make sure that when they presented that forged document to David Sterling, I was there to present the original. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for them to walk into it. The next 48 hours were going to be very long for the Brooks family. But for me, the clock was ticking down to the moment of absolute justice. The basement archive room at Onyx Stream was a place where dreams went to die. It was filled with tax records from the 90s and failed marketing prototypes. It smelled of dust and stale air. Nobody ever went down there. That was exactly why Otis and Trey chose it for their crime scene. I was sitting in the conference room of Elias Thorne's law office across town. The lights were off. The only illumination came from the blue glow of my laptop screen. On that screen was a high-definition live feed from the archive room's security camera. A camera I had installed 2 years ago after a janitor was caught stealing toner cartridges. My family had forgotten it existed, or maybe in their arrogance they assumed that firing me meant my eyes were closed. They were wrong. Otis was sweating. I could see the dark patches on his dress shirt even through the grainy video feed. He was tearing through cardboard boxes, throwing files onto the concrete floor in a frenzy. Trey stood by the door, bouncing on his heels, looking like a nervous lookout in a bank heist movie. "Find it," Otis snarled. He kicked a box of old invoices. "I know it is down here. We kept a copy of the original draft." I leaned closer to my screen. I knew exactly what they were looking for. 5 years ago, when I first licensed the code to the company, Otis had tried to slip a permanent transfer agreement into a stack of paperwork. He thought I would sign it without reading. I had caught it, laughed, and shredded it. But Otis, being a hoarder of potential leverage, had kept the unsigned original. "Got it," Trey shouted. He pulled a yellowing document from a red folder. "Here it is. The Intellectual Property Assignment Agreement. Dated 5 years ago." Otis snatched the paper from his son's hands. He smoothed it out on top of a filing cabinet. He looked at the signature line at the bottom. It was blank. "It is useless without her signature," Trey said, his voice trembling. "Vanguard is going to check. They are going to want a forensic verification." Otis stared at the blank line. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of cardstock. It was a birthday card. Specifically the card I had given him for his 60th birthday just last month. I watched my stomach twisting in disgust. I remembered writing that card. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table trying to find words of love for a father who made me feel small. I had signed it "Love, always your daughter Jada." It was a genuine signature. A signature born of loyalty. And now he was going to use that loyalty to rob me. Otis walked over to the large multifunction scanner in the corner of the room. He placed the contract on the glass. He scanned it. Then he placed the birthday card on the glass. He scanned that too. "What are you doing?" Trey asked. Otis sat down at the computer terminal next to the scanner. I watched his fingers fly across the keyboard. He was not a coder, but Otis knew his way around Photoshop. He had spent years doctoring real estate photos to make small houses look like mansions. "I am fixing history," Otis muttered. On my screen, I could see a reflection of the monitor he was using. He pulled up the scan of the contract. Then he pulled up the scan of the birthday card. He used the crop tool. He carefully cut out my signature from the card. He erased the words, "Love always and your daughter." All that was left was Jada Brooks. He dragged the floating signature onto the bottom of the contract. He resized it. He tilted it slightly to the left to make it look natural. Then he adjusted the ink density to match the rest of the document. Dad, Trey whispered, "That is a felony. That is forgery. If David Sterling finds out, we go to jail. Federal prison." Otis did not look up. He was focused on the screen like an artist completing a masterpiece. "David Sterling is not going to find out," Otis said calmly, "because tomorrow morning we are going to print this on the old dot matrix printer so the ink looks aged. Then we are going to rub the paper on the floor to roughen the fibers. By the time we hand it to the lawyers, it will look like it has been sitting in a drawer for 5 years." "But what if Jada denies it?" Trey asked. Otis finally turned to look at his son. His eyes were cold, dead. Who are they going to believe? The angry ex-employee who is trying to blackmail the company, or the grieving family who just wants to secure the future of their grandchild? We will tell them Jada forgot she signed it. We will say she is mentally unstable. We will gaslight her until she questions her own memory. Trey went silent. I watched him struggle. I watched him weigh his fear of prison against his greed for the billion-dollar payout. Greed won. "Do it," Trey said. Otis hit the print button. The printer in the corner whirred to life. It spat out the document. A fresh lie on warm paper. Otis picked it up. He blew on it as if drying the ink of a ghost. Then he held it up to the light. "Perfect," Otis said. "We own it now. We own her." They hugged. My father and my brother embraced in that dusty basement, celebrating a crime that was supposed to destroy me. They looked relieved. They looked like they had just escaped a burning building. I sat back in my chair at the law firm. I was not angry anymore. I was past anger. I reached out and pressed the save button on my recording software. File saved. Archive room camera 1, 11:42 p.m. I had the video. I had the timestamps. I had the screen capture of them using Photoshop. I even had the audio of them discussing how to make the paper look old. They thought they were forging a contract. In reality, they were signing their own confession. I closed my laptop. Elias Thorne walked into the conference room holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked at me, then at the black screen. "Did they do it?" Elias asked. I took the coffee from him. I felt calm. Dangerous. "They did," I said. "They made a masterpiece." "Then we are ready for tomorrow," Elias said. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow was the signing ceremony. Tomorrow they would walk into that room with their forged paper and their smug smiles, thinking they had outsmarted the girl they underestimated. They had no idea that I was not just bringing a lawyer to the meeting. I was bringing the truth. And unlike their forgery, the truth did not need Photoshop to be terrified. "Let us go home, Elias," I said. "I want to get a good night's sleep. I want to look my best when I watch my father realize that the daughter he betrayed is the one holding the gavel." The next morning, I received a text message from Courtney. It was short and deceptively friendly. It said simply, "Meet me at Le Jardin at 10 a.m. My treat, we need to clear the air." Le Jardin was the kind of cafe where the coffee cost $15 and the air smelled of old money and judgment. It was the preferred habitat of women like Courtney, the Buckhead wives, who spent their days managing their social calendars and their husbands' egos. I knew exactly why she wanted to meet. She wanted a victory lap. She wanted to look me in the eye and watch me crumble. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. I wore sunglasses and my sharpest white suit. When I walked in, Courtney was already seated at a corner table sipping a green matcha latte. She looked radiant. Her hair was blown out to perfection, and she was wearing a pastel yellow sundress that showed off her baby bump, just enough to garnish sympathy from anyone walking by. She waved at me, a tiny frantic motion, as if we were best friends meeting for brunch. "Over here, Jada," she called out. I walked over and sat down. I did not take off my sunglasses. I did not order a drink. I just folded my hands on the marble table and waited. "You look tired," Courtney said, tilting her head. "I guess unemployment is stressful." "I am fine, Courtney," I said. "What do you want?" Courtney sighed, placing a hand on her chest. "I just wanted to reach out. Yesterday was so intense. All that yelling, all those hurtful things you said about Trey. I wanted to give you a chance to apologize before things get legal." "Apologize?" I asked. "For what?" "For not letting you steal my company." Courtney laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "See, that is your problem, Jada. You are always so dramatic. Stealing. Nobody is stealing anything. In fact, that is why I asked you here. I have some good news." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Otis found the file," she said. I stayed perfectly still. Inside, my heart was racing, but not with fear, with anticipation. "What file?" I asked. "The transfer agreement," Courtney said, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "The one you signed 5 years ago. You know, we were all so worried yesterday. We thought maybe you really had forgotten to sign it. But Otis went down to the archives last night and dug through every single box. And guess what? He found it, right there in the 2019 folder, signed, sealed, and notarized. I reached into my pocket and silently tapped the record button on my phone. Is that so? I asked. I do not remember signing any transfer agreement. In fact, I remember specifically refusing to sign it. Courtney waved her hand dismissively. Oh, you know how memory works. You were young. You were just starting out. You probably signed a whole stack of papers Otis gave you and just forgot about that one. It happens. Mommy brain comes early sometimes, right? Oh, wait, you are not a mom. She took a sip of her latte, leaving a rim of green foam on her lip. So let me get this straight, I said, speaking clearly for the recording. You are telling me that Otis found a document with my signature on it last night. A document that transfers all intellectual property rights of the JD protocol to Onyx Stream, and he is going to present this document to Vanguard Tech today. Exactly, Courtney beamed. Isn't that a relief? Now we do not have to fight. The deal can go through. Trey gets his payout, the baby gets his trust fund, and well, you get to avoid being sued for fraud. Because if you keep claiming you own the code when we have a document proving you do not, that is fraud, Jada. Otis is willing to let it slide if you just back down now. I looked at her. She was so confident. She truly believed that they had pulled it off. Or maybe she knew it was a lie and just didn't care as long as the check cleared. It didn't matter. Her arrogance was her confession. And you have seen this document, I asked. Of course, Courtney said. It is perfect. Your signature is right there at the bottom. It looks exactly like the one on your birthday cards. I almost smiled. She had just given away the game. That is amazing, I said. Otis must be very relieved. He is, Courtney said. He is meeting with David Sterling at noon for the signing ceremony. He wants you to be there, Jada, as a show of unity. He wants you to stand next to Trey and smile while they sign the deal. If you do that, maybe he will even let you come back as a consultant. Maybe. I stood up. I had what I needed. I will be there, I said. Courtney looked surprised. Really? You will come? I would not miss it for the world, I said. She smiled a genuine predatory smile. Good. I am glad you finally came to your senses. You know, Jada. I always told Trey you were smart. I knew you would realize eventually that you cannot beat the family. We are too strong. I looked down at her. She was surrounded by her shopping bags and her expensive coffee, living in a bubble of delusion that was about to burst. You are right, Courtney, I said. I cannot beat the family. But the truth can. What does that mean? She asked, her smile faltering slightly. I did not answer. I just turned and walked out of the cafe. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I stopped the recording and uploaded it immediately to the cloud. I forwarded a copy to Elias Thorne with a simple subject line: The Confession. Courtney thought she had just delivered my surrender. In reality, she had just handed me the final bullet I needed to put this rebellion down. I checked my watch. It was 10:30 a.m. The meeting with David Sterling was at noon. I had 90 minutes to get to the St. Regis meet with Elias and prepare the theater for the final act. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the security system at the Onyx Stream building. Access granted to Conference Room A. Otis and Trey were already there setting up their stage. They were probably practicing their handshakes. They were probably joking about how easy it was to fool a girl. I hailed a taxi. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. You look like you are on a mission, lady, he said. I am, I replied. I am going to a funeral. He looked confused. I am sorry for your loss. Who died? Nobody yet, I said. But a reputation is about to take its last breath. I sat back and watched the city fly by. I felt a strange calm settling over me. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard logic of the code. Input betrayal, process justice, output payoff. I closed my eyes and visualized the boardroom. I visualized the look on Otis's face when I walked in. I visualized the moment the forged document hit the table, and for the first time in days I allowed myself to smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of the architect watching the demolition charges go off exactly as planned. The conference room at Vanguard Tech was designed to intimidate. It was situated on the top floor of a glass tower that pierced the Atlanta skyline, offering a 360-degree view of the city my family thought they owned. The table was made of imported Italian marble long enough to land a small plane on, and at the center of it sat a silver bucket containing a bottle of Dom Perignon. My father Otis sat at the head of the table looking like a man who had just conquered a kingdom. He had polished his shoes until they mirrored the overhead lights, and his silk tie was tied in a knot so tight it looked like it might cut off his circulation. Next to him, Bernice was already mentally spending the money. I could see it in the way she smoothed her dress, her eyes darting around the room, assessing the value of the artwork on the walls. She was probably calculating how many similar pieces she could buy for the new estate in Buckhead once the wire transfer hit. Trey and Courtney sat on the opposite side holding hands. Trey was vibrating with nervous energy, his leg bouncing up and down under the table. He kept checking his watch, then checking the leather portfolio that sat in front of Otis. Inside that portfolio was the forged document, the masterpiece of fraud they had created in the basement. Courtney looked serene, almost bored, as if closing a billion-dollar deal was just another Tuesday for her. She whispered something in Trey's ear, and he let out a short, jagged laugh. They were dreaming of yachts. They were dreaming of private islands. They were dreaming of a life where they never had to work again. At exactly 12:15, the double doors opened. David Sterling walked in, flanked by 3 men in dark gray suits. Sterling was a legend in the tech world, known for his ruthless efficiency and his ability to smell a bad deal from a mile away. He did not smile. He did not offer handshakes. He simply walked to the other end of the table and sat down, placing a single thin folder in front of him. "Gentlemen," Sterling said, his voice deep and devoid of warmth. "And ladies, I apologize for the delay. My legal team was reviewing some last-minute anomalies in the system architecture." Otis cleared his throat, flashing his salesman's smile. "No apology necessary, David. We understand. Due diligence is the cornerstone of good business. We are just happy to be here to finalize this historic partnership." Sterling looked at Otis, then at Trey. His gaze lingered on Trey for a second too long, making my brother shift uncomfortably in his seat. "Partnership." Sterling repeated, testing the word. "Yes, that is the goal. However, before we uncork that champagne, there is a matter of personnel. I was expecting to see your chief technology officer here today." The room went quiet. This was the moment. The lie had to be perfect. Otis did not blink. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the marble table, projecting the image of a concerned father. "Ah, yes," Otis said, his voice dripping with faux regret. "Jada sends her deepest apologies. She was taken ill very suddenly last night. Food poisoning, we think. She is devastated to miss this, but the doctor insisted on bed rest. She is very fragile right now." Bernice chimed in, nodding sympathetically. "Poor thing could barely lift her head. But she told us to go ahead without her. She wants this deal to happen just as much as we do. She knows how important this is for the family legacy." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "Food poisoning. That is unfortunate. I had several technical questions regarding the compression algorithm that only she could answer. My engineers are still reporting a total system lockout. They say the code is demanding a biometric key." Trey jumped in, eager to prove his worth. "That is just a security glitch, David. We have the override codes right here. Once we sign the papers, I will personally go down to the server room with your team and reset the protocols. It is a standard safety feature. Nothing to worry about." Sterling tapped his finger on the folder in front of him. "A standard safety feature that locks out the owners of the company." "Interesting." Otis sensed the skepticism in the air. He decided to play his ace card. He reached for the leather portfolio and unzipped it. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "David, let us not get bogged down in technicalities," Otis said, pulling out the forged document. The paper looked old. The edges were slightly frayed, the ink faded just enough to look like it had been sitting in a file cabinet for 5 years. We know you are worried about the intellectual property rights. We know Jada has been difficult in the past. But we want to put your mind at ease. Otis slid the document across the marble table. It stopped perfectly within Sterling's reach. This is the original assignment of rights agreement, Otis lied, looking Sterling dead in the eye, signed by Jada Brooks 5 years ago. It proves unequivocally that Onyx Stream owns every line of code, every algorithm, and every patent. Jada has no claim. She is just an employee. And as of today, a former employee. Sterling looked down at the paper. He did not pick it up immediately. He just stared at the signature at the bottom. The signature that had been lifted from a birthday card. The signature that was a testament to a daughter's love now twisted into a tool of theft. It certainly looks official, Sterling said softly. It is, Otis said, leaning back in his chair. Notarized and filed. So you see, there is no risk. The code belongs to us, and now it belongs to you. Courtney let out a small sigh of relief. She reached for the champagne bottle. Shall we pour a glass, then? To celebrate. Sterling looked up. His eyes were hard. Not yet, he said. I have a policy. I never sign a deal until I have met all the stakeholders. And since Ms. Brooks is so ill, I took the liberty of calling in a specialist to verify this document. Otis frowned. A specialist? Yes, Sterling said. And I also invited a guest. Someone who might be able to explain why my system diagnostics are showing that the code has been remotely bricked by an external user. The doors opened again. Otis turned around expecting to see a technician. Trey stopped bouncing his leg. Bernice froze. But it was not a technician. It was me. I walked into the room wearing my white suit, looking very much alive and very much not sick. Flanking me was Elias Thorne carrying a briefcase and a tall man in a windbreaker that had 3 very specific yellow letters on the back. FBI. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father, I said, walking past the stunned silence of my family. Otis stood up, his face turning a shade of purple I had never seen before. Jada, what are you doing here? You are supposed to be sick, I finished for him. I know. It is a miracle recovery. I walked to the table and stood next to David Sterling. I looked down at the forged document. I looked at the fake signature. Then I looked at the champagne bottle that Courtney was still holding. You might want to put that down, Courtney, I said. I do not think anyone is going to be drinking today. Unless they serve champagne in federal holding cells. Trey made a sound like a balloon deflating. Otis looked from me to Sterling and then to the FBI agent. The arrogance drained out of his face, replaced by the terrifying realization that the trap had snapped shut, and he was the one with his leg in the metal jaws. I smiled at David Sterling. I believe you were waiting for the real owner, I said. Sterling stood up and extended his hand. Ms. Brooks, a pleasure to finally meet the architect. The setup was complete. Now it was time for the execution. The heavy oak doors of the conference room did not just open. They swung wide with a force that sucked the air right out of the room. I stepped across the threshold, my heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. I was wearing my white suit, pristine and sharp, a stark contrast to the dark, suffocating lies my family had been spinning. I was not alone. To my left walked Elias Thorne, clutching a briefcase that contained the lethal injection for their fraudulent scheme. To my right walked Special Agent Miller. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a navy blue windbreaker with 3 bright yellow letters printed on the chest. FBI. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right after a car crash, before the screaming starts. Otis was the first to react. He stood up so quickly that his heavy leather chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the floor with a sound like a gunshot. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Jada, he stammered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? You are sick. You are in the hospital. I stopped at the end of the long table. I looked at him. I looked at Bernice, whose hand was frozen halfway to her mouth. I looked at Trey, who had shrunk down in his seat looking like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar. And I looked at Courtney, whose eyes were darting between the FBI agent and the champagne bottle she was still foolishly holding. "I made a miraculous recovery, Father," I said, my voice calm and carrying to every corner of the room. It is amazing what a little fresh air and the threat of grand larceny can do for a woman's health. Otis tried to regain control. He smoothed his tie, his hands shaking visibly. He turned to David Sterling, forcing a laugh that sounded like choking. "David, I am so sorry. My daughter is clearly delirious. The fever must have gone to her brain. She is having a mental breakdown. Please excuse us while I have security escort her out." Otis reached for the phone on the conference table. "Do not touch that phone, Otis. The command did not come from me. It came from the head of the table." David Sterling had not moved since I walked in. He sat there, his eyes fixed on me, ignoring my father completely. Otis froze his hand, hovering over the receiver. "But David, she is interrupting a $1 billion transaction. She is unstable." "She is the only person in this room who seems stable," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "And she is certainly the only one who didn't try to sell me a stolen car with a fresh coat of paint." Sterling stood up. He was a tall man, imposing and powerful. He walked past Otis as if my father were invisible. He walked past Trey, who could not even lift his head. He walked straight to me. He extended his hand. "Ms. Brooks, I presume," Sterling said. I took his hand. His grip was firm, respectful. It was the handshake of an equal. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Sterling," I said. I apologize for the theatrics. My family has a flair for the dramatic. Sterling smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "No apology necessary. I have been waiting for this moment. Welcome to the table. It is an honor to finally meet the real partner, the architect." The words hung in the air. Real partner. Behind us, Bernice let out a small, strangled gasp. "Wait a minute," Otis shouted, finding his voice again. "This is outrageous. You cannot speak to her like that. She is a fired employee. She has no rights here. We have the contract. We have the signature." Otis pointed a trembling finger at the forged document sitting on the table. Agent Miller stepped forward. He did not shout. He did not draw a weapon. He simply placed his hands on his hips and looked at Otis with the bored expression of a man who had arrested 100 men just like him. "Mr. Brooks," Agent Miller said, "I am Special Agent Miller with the Cybercrimes Division. I suggest you lower your voice and sit down. We are currently recording this meeting as part of an active federal investigation into wire fraud and forgery." "Forgery?" Courtney squeaked. Her face was pale. "I did not do anything. I am just here for moral support." Agent Miller looked at her. "We have video footage from the basement archive room recorded last night at 11:40 p.m. It shows two individuals altering a legal document using a scanner and a birthday card." Trey made a sound like a dying animal. He buried his face in his hands. Otis looked at the document. Then he looked at me. His eyes were filled with hate, pure and unadulterated. He realized in that second that I had been watching. I had been watching the whole time. "You set us up," Otis whispered. "You ungrateful witch. You watched us do it, and you did nothing." I walked over to the table and picked up the forged contract. I held it up to the light. "I did not make you do anything I said. I did not make you fire me. I did not make you steal my work. And I certainly did not make you commit a felony to cover your tracks. You did all of that on your own. I just provided the lighting." David Sterling walked back to his chair. He picked up the folder Otis had given him and dropped it into the wastebasket. "The deal with Onyx Stream is terminated, effective immediately," Sterling announced. "Vanguard Tech does not do business with criminals. However, we are still very interested in the compression technology." He turned to me. "Ms. Brooks, if you are willing, I would like to discuss a direct acquisition of JD Protocol LLC. My team has prepared a new offer, $2.2 billion. Cash. The number echoed in the room. 2.2 billion. It was 400 million more than the original offer. Otis looked like he was having a heart attack. Bernice was weeping openly now, clutching her pearls. Trey was staring at the table, realizing he had lost everything. I looked at Sterling. I think that sounds like a fair starting point, I said. But first, I think we need to clear the room. I prefer to do business without an audience, especially an audience that is about to be read their Miranda rights. Sterling nodded to Agent Miller. Please, Sterling said. Take out the trash. Agent Miller pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. He walked toward Otis. Otis Brooks, stand up and put your hands behind your back, Miller ordered. My father looked at me one last time. There was no love left, only fear. And for the first time in my life, I did not care. I turned my back on him and sat down in the CEO chair. It was comfortable. It fit me perfectly. I walked over to the audio-visual console at the front of the room. The room was so quiet that the sound of my cable clicking into the port echoed like a gunshot. The massive screen behind David Sterling lowered with a soft mechanical hum. Otis was standing frozen near his chair, his face a mask of pure terror. He knew what was coming. He knew that the basement archive room was the one place he thought was safe, and he was about to find out that nowhere was safe from the woman he had underestimated. I tapped the screen of my tablet. A video player opened. I think before we discuss the acquisition, we should review the provenance of the assets, I said calmly. I hit play. The screen filled with the grainy green-tinted footage of the Onyx Stream basement. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m. the previous night. The image was crystal clear. It showed Otis Brooks and Trey Brooks standing over a scanner. It showed Otis pulling a birthday card out of his pocket. The audio captured by the high-gain microphone I had installed played through the surround sound speakers of the conference room. I am fixing history, the voice of Otis said from the screen. Then came Trey's voice. But Dad, that is a felony. That is forgery. And then Otis again. Who are they going to believe? The angry ex-employee or the grieving family? We will gaslight her until she questions her own memory. In the conference room, the real Otis let out a strangled sob. He reached out as if to cover the screen with his hand, but Agent Miller stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Sit down, Mr. Brooks, Agent Miller ordered. The show is not over. I watched Bernice. She was staring at the screen, her mouth open in horror. Not because her husband was committing a crime, but because he was getting caught. She looked at the video of Otis cutting my signature, the signature I had written with love on a card, thanking him for being my father and pasting it onto a lie. That is my birthday card, Otis whispered, his voice trembling. You filmed me reading my birthday card. No, I corrected him. I filmed you turning my affection into a weapon. And I filmed you admitting to federal securities fraud. I swiped the screen. The video disappeared, replaced by a complex spreadsheet. Rows of red numbers and wire transfers filled the display. But forgery is only the beginning. I continued, turning to face Trey. David, you asked why the company cash reserves were so low during your due diligence. Otis told you it was because of heavy R&D investment. I pointed to the screen. This is the real ledger. It shows $5 million siphoned out of the operating account over the last 18 months. It did not go to research and development. It went here. I zoomed in on a series of transactions. Lucky Strike Holdings Antigua. That is an offshore gambling site. And here. Hermes of Atlanta. Tiffany and Company. Porsche Financial Services. I looked at Courtney. She was staring at the screen, reading the list of luxury items. Trey, she whispered. You told me you bought my Birkin bag with your bonus. You told me the Porsche was a company car. It was a company car, I said. In the sense that the company paid for it illegally. Trey has been embezzling funds since the day he was appointed director of marketing. He has gambled away the employee pension fund. He has drained the tax reserve. Onyx Stream is not just technically broken, it is financially insolvent. Trey slid out of his chair and fell to his knees. It was not a gesture of prayer. His legs simply gave out. He was weeping openly now, snot running down his face, ruining his expensive suit. "I did it for the family," Trey sobbed. "I just wanted to look successful. I wanted Dad to be proud of me." David Sterling stood up. His face was hard as stone. He looked at the forged document on the table. He looked at the video still of Otis. He looked at the weeping man on the floor. "This is disgusting," Sterling said. He picked up the forged contract. He did not shred it. He handed it to Agent Miller. "Evidence," Sterling said. Then he turned to Otis. "Mr. Brooks, the offer from Vanguard Tech is hereby rescinded. We do not acquire crime scenes. We do not do business with frauds. Your company is worthless. In fact, it is less than worthless. It is a liability." Otis looked at Sterling, his eyes wide and pleading. "David, please. We can explain. We can fix the money. I have assets. I can pay it back. Just sign the deal. We need this money." "You do not have assets," I said, stepping forward. I took the liberty of looking up the mortgage on the Buckhead estate. "You are leveraged to the hilt. You took out a second mortgage to cover Trey's gambling debts last year. You are broke, Otis. And now that Vanguard is walking away, the banks are going to call those loans." Bernice let out a scream, a high, piercing sound of a woman watching her social status evaporate. "My house," she wailed. "My beautiful house. Where will we live?" "That is not really my concern," I said coldly. I turned to David Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, Onyx Stream is a sinking ship. But the engine, the code that you actually want, is safe. It is owned by JD Protocol, LLC. It is clean, it is debt-free, and it is ready to be integrated into your systems immediately." Sterling looked at me. The disgust on his face faded, replaced by respect. "You protected the asset," he said. "I protected my work," I replied. Sterling nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold fountain pen. $2.2 billion, he said. "Direct acquisition of JD Protocol. You stay on as CEO of the new division, full autonomy, and a seat on the Vanguard board." "That sounds acceptable," I said. Sterling looked at the FBI agent. "Are we done here?" Sterling asked. Agent Miller stepped forward, pulling a second pair of handcuffs from his belt. He walked over to Trey, who was still crying on the floor. "Trey Brooks, you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit forgery. Stand up." Trey wailed as the cold metal clicked around his wrists. Courtney screamed, backing away from him as if he were contagious. "I did not know," Courtney shouted at the agent. "I am a victim here. He lied to me." Agent Miller looked at her. "We will check the bank records, Mrs. Brooks. If any of that stolen money went into your personal accounts, we will be coming for you next." Courtney went silent, her face turning white. Then Miller turned to Otis. "Otis Brooks, you are under arrest for securities fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." My father stood there as the agent cuffed him. He looked at me. His eyes were not angry anymore. They were empty. He was a man who had spent his life chasing the appearance of power, and now he was completely powerless. "Jada," he whispered, "I am your father." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sold me out. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my name. "I know," I said, "and that is the only reason I am not suing you for emotional damages on top of everything else. Consider that my final gift to you." I turned back to David Sterling. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Sterling opened a fresh folder. He laid it on the table right next to where Otis was standing in handcuffs. "Right here," Sterling said. I picked up the pen. I did not hesitate. I signed my name, Jada Brooks. The same signature Otis had tried to steal, but this time it was worth $2.2 billion, and it belonged to me. As I finished signing, Agent Miller began to lead my father and brother out of the room. Bernice followed them, sobbing hysterically, begging the agent not to take them out through the front lobby where people could see. I did not watch them go. I was too busy discussing the integration timeline with my new partner. The toxins had been purged, the system was clean, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. At the head of the table, the sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight is distinct. It is a mechanical final sound that signals the end of freedom and the beginning of consequences. In that pristine conference room, surrounded by panoramic views of the city my father thought he owned, that sound was the only music I needed to hear. Otis Brooks, the man who had terrified me as a child, the man who had dismissed me as a woman, and the man who had tried to rob me as an entrepreneur, was now just a prisoner. He stood hunched over his expensive suit jacket, bunched up awkwardly around his restrained arms. He looked old. He looked small. The arrogance that had fueled him for 60 years had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified old man facing federal prison time for securities fraud. Next to him, Trey was still weeping. It was a pathetic, gasping sound. My brother, the golden child, the one who was promised the world without ever having to lift a finger, was now facing a future where his only audience would be a court-appointed attorney. Courtney was not going down quietly. As Agent Miller read her rights, she began to scream. She was not screaming for her husband. She was screaming for herself. "I am pregnant," she shrieked, twisting away from the agent. "You cannot arrest me. I have high blood pressure. This is police brutality. I did not know the documents were forged. Trey told me they were real. He lied to me. Arrest him, not me." Trey looked up at her, betrayal washing over his tear-streaked face. "Courtney," he whispered. "Shut up, Trey," she snapped back. "You ruined my life. I should have married the quarterback." I watched them turn on each other. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. Then there was Bernice, my mother. She stood by the window clutching her pearl necklace as if it were a rosary. She watched Otis being led toward the door. She watched Trey being pulled to his feet. She looked at me sitting in the CEO chair signing the final page of the acquisition deal. She realized then that there was no coming back from this. The house in Buckhead was gone. The country club membership was gone. The fake reputation of the perfect Brooks family was gone. She decided to play her final card. "Oh God," Bernice cried out, her hand fluttering to her forehead. "My heart! I cannot breathe." She collapsed onto the carpet. It was a theatrical fall, graceful enough not to hit her head, but dramatic enough to make a thud. She lay there, eyelids fluttering, waiting for someone to rush to her side, waiting for me to run over and comfort her. Agent Miller paused. "We need a medic," he said into his radio. I stood up and capped the gold pen David Sterling had given me. I walked over to where my mother lay. I looked down at her. I could see her eyes moving beneath her lids. I could see her breathing steadied when she thought no one was looking. "Save your resources, Agent," I said calmly. "She is not having a heart attack. She is having a reality check." I stepped over her legs. Bernice's eyes snapped open. She glared at me from the floor, her mask of fragility slipping for a second. "You are a monster," she hissed. "No, Mother," I replied. "I am a billionaire. There is a difference." I walked toward the double doors. David Sterling walked with me. He shook my hand firmly. "We will have the funds wired by end of day," Sterling said. "Your keycard for the new office will be ready tomorrow. Take the rest of the day off, Jada. You earned it." "Thank you, David," I said. "I think I will." I walked out of the conference room. I walked past the receptionist, who looked terrified. I walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, cutting off the sound of Courtney screaming and my mother's fake sobbing, I let out a long, deep breath. The silence in the elevator was beautiful. I walked out of the Vanguard building and into the Atlanta afternoon. The air smelled sweeter. The sun felt warmer. I stood on the sidewalk watching as 2 police cruisers pulled up to the curb. Officers rushed inside to assist Agent Miller. They were going to haul my family out in front of the lunch hour crowd. It would be on the evening news. I did not stay to watch. I did not need to see them in the back of a squad car to know I had won. I pulled out my phone. It buzzed with a notification from my bank. Wire transfer received. Vanguard Technologies. I opened the app. I stared at the balance. $2,200,000,000. The number was so large it did not look real. It looked like a phone number, but it was real. It was the price of my code. It was the price of my pain. It was the price of 7 years of being overlooked, undervalued, and betrayed. I tapped the screen and initiated a transfer. I moved 10% of the money into a new charitable foundation I had just registered. The foundation was dedicated to providing scholarships for young Black women in STEM fields. I was going to make sure that the next Jada Brooks did not have to rely on a father like Otis to get her start. Then I opened my contacts list. I scrolled down. Dad, block contact. Mom, block contact. Trey, block contact. Courtney, block contact. I hesitated on the last one. Aunt Sheila, the family gossip. I typed a text message to her. Watch the news tonight, Sheila, and tell the rest of the family that if they need money, they should ask Otis. I hear he is going to be making 10 cents an hour stamping license plates for the next 10 years. I hit send. Then I blocked her too. I put my phone in my purse. I hailed a taxi. Where to, miss? The driver asked. The airport, I said. You going on a trip? He asked. I smiled. A real smile. One that reached my eyes. Yes, I said. I am going to St. Bart's. I hear there is a villa available. The previous buyers had a sudden change of plans. As the taxi pulled away, merging into the traffic, I did not look back at the glass tower. I did not look back at the wreckage of my family. I looked forward at the open road. I was 29 years old. I was a tech mogul. I was free. And the best part was, I had written the code for my own life, and finally there were no glitches left. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to save yourself, I want you to know that you are not alone. It is not selfish to choose your own peace. It is survival. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and resilience. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your family sold your life's work? Would you forgive them, or would you do exactly what I did? Until next time, remember, your value is not determined by how your family treats you. It is determined by what you refuse to accept.